Our story starts with a cultural and historical orientation. The last time I was in Tanzania in 2000, my guide took me to a map, and that map was basically of the Ngorongoro crater area. But he pointed out a lake, Lake Eyasi, and he told me that there were bushmen at this location. Now at that time I didn't know if he merely meant there were men in the bush or people who spoke the Click language. He meant people who spoke the old Click language. The Hadza or Hadzabe people may have been in Tanzania for tens of thousands of years. There's only about 1,000 of them, and only 300 or 400 still operate as hunter-gatherers. Traditionally, they've been thought to have been related to the Khoisan people in South Africa because they do use the old Click language, and the Click language may very well be the first human language. However, recent DNA tests suggest otherwise. They suggest that maybe the Hadza are more closely related to pygmy groups, and that there's been an overlay of Bantu more recently. This morning we're going to be going hunting with the Hadza. They hunt with bows and arrows, and those arrows are only sharpened sticks, unless they're hunting big game. But it was the way they were fletched that I was interested in. The ends of the feathers' quills have been bent back and tied down to the arrow. In preparation for the hunt, the Hadzabe are getting a little something to eat, a little breakfast, and they're working with their arrows, sharpening them up for the hunt. For larger game, the Hadza do use steel-tipped arrows, which they can currently get from other tribes, or they'll also use poison-tipped arrows. The poison in the arrows comes from these plants. The poison is made from the Adenum coetanium, or elephant's foot. This is the Hadza's living quarters. We found them living in these air-conditioned huts. Hadza men usually hunt individually, and in addition to wild game, they might bring home honey or fruit. Hadza women usually go out in slightly larger groups, and they bring home things like berries, baobab fruit, tubers, depending on whatever the availability happens to be. To get us ready for the hunt, they gave us their bows and arrows and allowed us to take a little bit of target practice. I don't think that the animals are in any danger from us, however.
I failed miserably. I did. It landed over here. Oh, better. That's good. I'm happy. Somebody else want to try? Okay. I'd like to have a picture of them doing it.
Oh well, hunting isn't women's work anyway. Maybe the Hadza would like to see what one of the guys can do. Surely the guys can do a lot better.
You guys want to try it?
Yeah.
They had tried for me, but I don't know. Oh, that's
Oh, okay. You gotta angle it more.
No. He wants you to pull it back. He wants you to go to the full draw.
Okay.
The Hadza bows are made out of a wood which reminds me a great deal of the American Osage orange, the material that American Indians made their bows out of. It's very stiff, and it requires a great deal of strength to come back to a full draw. Traditionally, the Hadza don't make use of hunting dogs, although this custom has been recently borrowed from some neighboring tribes to some degree. Most men, around 80%, don't use dogs while foraging, but our group did. During the morning hunt, our group shot 2 small birds and 2 squirrels about the size of an American red squirrel. How they hit them, I don't know, but I actually saw them kill one of the birds with an arrow. Now that we've got breakfast, we need to build a fire so that we can cook it. The fire making is going to be done in a traditional way, and the amount of time that you see it occurring, the amount of time it takes for you to see us making a fire, is about how long the Hadza actually did use to make that fire.
The small one, this is from the Comifera africana, and this one is from the sandpaper tree.
Hadza cooking techniques are basically heat and eat, with very little preparation involved.
Why not?
Awesome. Kenny?
Whatever you want, yeah?
Try it. We got your back. And then you can tell us how it
Somebody's
feels.
going to have to hold the camera at some point. I'm
Yes,
sure.
I know, Kuaba.
After breakfast, we're going back to base camp, where we're going to be entertained with a little bit of tribal singing. One of the things that I noticed was that when they're singing, the Hadza don't seem to use their clicks at all. Although hunting is illegal on the Serengeti, the Tanzanian authorities recognize that the Hadza are a special case, and they don't enforce the regulations against them, just as the Hadza are the only people in Tanzania that are not locally taxed or taxed by the national government. In fact, the Hadza were virtually invisible up until recently. It was only after documentaries on the Hadza that appeared on PBS and BBC in 2001 that the Hadza became a tourist attraction. Although this has given the Hadza some monetary income, it's also introduced alcohol for the first time. Something else that you might find interesting was that in 2007, the local government controlling the Hadza lands leased those lands to the Abu Dhabi royal family as a personal safari playground. Both the Hadza and the Datoga, which we're going to be talking about later, were evicted, and some of the Hadza resistors were imprisoned. However, after negative coverage in the international press, the deal was rescinded. Let me take you back to our base camp now, where we have a swimming hole. It's a wonderful looking swimming hole fed by a mountain stream with very clear, cool water in it. But there's no one swimming in this swimming hole, and the reason for that is because some time ago some Germans and Danes did go swimming in this swimming hole, and they discovered that it was loaded with a parasite called schistosomiasis. Schistosomiasis can burrow straight through the skin, so no swimming. Incidentally, I discovered this on the internet before we arrived. The people that managed the property commented on the birds as soon as we arrived. They were making a huge amount of noise, and the managers told us that every time that it rained, and it had just rained, the birds got very excited. These particular birds are village weavers. And of course what they're doing is they're weaving their nests out of local vegetation. They've been stripping everything within sight. As a matter of fact, the ornamental papyrus, which normally looks something like this, had been shredded and turned into stuff that looked like this. The next people that we're going to visit are the Datoga. Now the Datoga came in sometime after the Hadza. We're not sure exactly when, but certainly they have an entirely different linguistic structure. Approximately 3,000 years ago, the Datoga probably lived either in the western Ethiopian highlands or in southern Sudan. It's a little unclear just exactly which. In any event, Kushite people were moving south at about that period of time out of that area. Datoga house construction depends on mud and sticks, being a substantial advancement over the Hadzabe. Today the Datoga do a great deal of metalworking. Originally the Datoga were herders, but they've diversified into agriculture in more recent times. They were a proud people with a very good reputation as fierce warriors. Traditionally, young men had to prove themselves by killing an enemy of the people, defined as any human being not a Datoga, or one of the dangerous wild animals like an elephant, lion, or a buffalo. Here the Datoga are making an iron arrowhead. Originally, the Datoga had to smelt ore in order to get the metal. These days, they collect scraps and remelt it. The level of technology that's being used is very similar to that which would have occurred during the Egyptian period, maybe 3,000 years ago or so. The bellows is heating a fire that's being used to melt copper. Now, this copper happened to have come out of an automobile's radiator.
What do they do with the liquid then?
After take out there, they heat it again in the fire, and then they use
Apparently the metal is not cast into a shape, but instead it is melted into an ingot and then beaten into the desired shape. About 2,000 years ago, a migration of Bantus cut these Datoga off from their culturally related kin up in Ethiopia. Today, the vast majority of people in Tanzania speak a Bantu language. We're moving now into historic periods. The Arabs began to exploit this area perhaps as early as about the 1st century A.D. Certainly there were some people from the area which is now Yemen that came down and were settling in Zanzibar to establish trading colonies and to begin to penetrate the interior. And then around 1498, the Portuguese landed in Zanzibar. Eventually, Zanzibar becomes British. The British take Zanzibar from the Sultan of Oman, who had taken it from the Yemenis years earlier. Later, the Germans started colonizing along the coast, what was called Tanganyika. That colonization was unauthorized by the German government, but pretty quickly the German government changed its mind and it became German East Africa. Later, of course, after World War I, the British take over that as well. The final migration into Tanganyika was by the Maasai arriving about the time of the American Civil War. This is a Maasai village, a village that depends primarily on herding. Traditionally, a young man becomes a warrior by killing an enemy of the Maasai or by killing a lion. Lions were sufficiently depleted, though, so that this rule is held in abeyance now. After the singing demonstration, the Maasai gave us a lesson on home repairs. traditional Maasai homes are rectangular. However, the more modern design is to make the huts circular. In addition to stopping off at the Maasai village and looking at things going on there, we also had a Maasai herbalist come out to our tent area and give us a nature walk where he showed us what herbs they might use.
Smell it over here.
Hey,
Would you like to
I can smell.
sijaenda ziko hapa tunauza dawa hapa.
What's this called?
Huh?
What's called? What's the name?
Ngoja jioni aje.
Next